Hello and welcome to episode 264 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, your favorite Climate Solutions podcast received a couple Sustainable Recognition Awards on the weekend. That's right, the Clean Energy Show is technically an award-winning podcast now. And we didn't even have to pay for a single billboard or take out an ad in Variety.
The fast fashion industry is getting a report card on how they're doing with sustainability. I don't want to give away the grades, but I think this is one report card that is destined to be eaten by the family dog.
The air quality in our city after the awards program was so bad, not only was it the worst in the entire world, it was like smoking more than a pack of cigarettes. Ah, the cool, refreshing taste of an air quality index of 446.
Now, you know, James, I have a solution for this. The great taste of menthol comes from peppermint and cornmint plants. So if we just plant a ton of all that stuff in our forests, breathing in the smoke will be like enjoying some menthol cigarettes.
Oh boy, all that aboard this edition of the Clean Energy Show.
You know, you can't get menthol cigarettes anymore in a lot of places, including here in Canada.
Okay.
So, yeah, James, I'm really looking forward to hearing about the awards ceremony over the weekend. It sounds like it was a lot of fun.
Was?
But we'll get to that in a second. I want to get straight into Brian's TV Corner.
Brian's TV Corner.
Anyway, so one of the things I like to watch on streaming services, I love a good, like, limited series, kind of crime, mystery, thriller type of show. Like if you go on Netflix, they have a ton of these kind of 8-episode, self-contained, you know, crime, mystery, thriller kind of shows. So I tend to watch a bunch of those things on streaming. But what I thought was fun was the last two that I watched both had essentially clean energy villains as the villains in the plot line.
So people like us were the villains.
It's something like that. So I'll explain that in a second. So there were two series I watched. One was called The Madness, and this stars Coleman Domingo and was directed by Clement Virgo, who's a great Canadian film director. And 8-episode series, and it's from last year. It's on Netflix. Yeah, like there's like a sort of a big business guy who's the bad guy. Like he's making all of his money off of clean energy.
Really?
But he's the villain in the story. Yeah. And then the other one I watched was a Danish series. I'd watched a couple of these from Sweden. There's a few Swedish crime, thriller, mystery kind of shows on Netflix. So I watched a couple of those. And then the algorithm sent me this Danish one, and it's called Secrets We Keep. And I haven't finished watching it, so I don't know the conclusion, but one of the bad guys, the neighbor of the woman who's the star of the show, he's a Danish wind turbine magnate who's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Of course, we talk about Danish wind turbines a lot on the show. Mm-hmm. That's the home of, you know, essentially high power wind turbines. So presumably somebody is making a ton of money off these wind turbines, but that appears to be the bad guy in this Danish crime show.
You need to hurt me?
Should I?
I haven't done anything.
No.
I hire people to keep people like you at bay while I solve problems.
Saving the world.
Providing answers.
For profit.
For air conditioners, because the earth is hot. And guess what air conditioners require?
Motherfuckers like you.
Zero carbon electricity.
Shut the up.
Yeah, so that's a clip from The Madness. That was Coleman Domingo talking to the bad guy in that show.
How's the series must be all right if you keep watching it.
Yeah, that's just kind of my thing. And then the algorithm starts feeding you more of these shows. And I keep watching them. So, yeah, I guess I like them.
All right, Brian, earlier this week, we have some breaking news on my eagle's nest.
Yes, it is breaking news, but it's good breaking news. Look at that liftoff for one of the Big Bear eaglets. They were born 13 weeks ago, and Sunny right there taking flight for the first time this morning.
Big day in Big Bear at our favorite eagle's nest. Did you see that? After 12 weeks of watching her grow up, Sunny has taken flight. And now everybody, of course, watching to see when her sister, Gizmo, will do the same.
Now, this is the third year that James, has been watching the Big Bear Lake Eagle's Nest in Northern California. It is a live stream. This has been going on for years. They have 2 cameras.
Yep.
They use solar panels to transmit and power the cameras. And there was a big snowstorm. Well, the first 2 years, I should say that if you're just joining us and you're new to the show, the eggs did not hatch. So they start to slowly give up on the nest, then ravens come and eat the eggs. And it's depressing, but it goes on. This year, not only they laid 3 eggs. They all hatched, but one died. One died in a snowstorm, and they also lost the microphone in that snowstorm.
Oh, no.
But this week on Monday, Sunny, the oldest eagle, like juvenile eagle, fledged, which means that they took off finally. They've been on the cusp of doing that for, I would say, weeks now. They've been practicing flapping their wings out on a branch.
Yep.
Finally got the courage to do it, and it became breaking news in Los Angeles, of course. Yeah, so the mic broke during the snowstorm, but I do have a clip. I had to recreate that myself because the microphone was broken from the snowstorm, so I
Sure.
did my best to guess what that would be like. And yeah, they were born in early February. They were about 90 days old, and they're both female. Biologists determined based on their pitch of their cries that they are both female, and they are both larger than the dad already, so that means they're female. And of course, I'm delighted to announce that our podcast has received some award recognition for the first time ever.
Those researching sustainability in Saskatchewan gathered today at the University of Regina. Recipients acquired certificates for projects that were based on the United Nations 17 Sustainable Goals. The certificates were given out by the Regional Centre of Expertise on Education and Sustainable Development.
One of our listeners, Glenn Wright, a local environmentalist, nominated us. He was very apologetic. He said, this is going to be some work for you. I know you're busy and sick and all that. But I ended up going because I give a recognition out to different sustainability groups. And usually you apply yourself. And if you want recognition, and they adjudicate it and give it to you. But they gave us a special award on top of that. We were then told we were given a new award on the day. It's a mouthful, so I'll play a clip from the introduction from the award show.
So this is a new award. The Recognition Award for Energy Innovation was established to honor initiatives that contribute to advancing renewable and alternative energy solutions in Saskatchewan. This award recognizes organizations, businesses, municipalities, or community groups that demonstrate leadership in promoting, implementing, or educating others about innovative energy technologies and their role in achieving a more sustainable future. And the winner this year is the Clean Energy Podcast, as represented by James Whittingham and Brian Stockton.
Okay, that's fake.
I thought that might be a little embellished.
I was
there,
watching
yeah.
to see the point where you would catch on. Yeah, I had to clean up the audio, so the cleaning up the audio took out the applause, what applause there was. So I just want everyone who was there to know that's how I imagined my reception going onto the stage. So yeah, the Lieutenant Governor of Saskatchewan was there actually handing the awards out, and it was, you probably don't know what that is if you live outside of Canada. The Lieutenant Governors are the highest ranking officers of their province and represent His Majesty the King under their jurisdictions. And ours had just sat down with the King for 45 minutes, not alone, but in a group, she said. Yeah. And yeah, she just came off talking to the King. And there's a regal ceremony when she arrives. She has a charge d'affaires or something, an official person with her who does everything for her. And we play O Canada, God Save the King in an abbreviated form, sort of a smash up of those two songs put together.
I didn't know that.
and then we had lunch. And we had lunch afterwards, and lunch was fine. And ours was the last award of a long day, one of 5 special awards that were given out, in addition to the recognition awards from the Regional Centre for Expertise. The Regional Centre for Expertise is a network of organizations and individuals designated by the United Nations University that work together to promote education for sustainable development in a particular region. And these networks are committed to using education as a tool for building a sustainable future. The United Nations University, Brian, was created in the early 70s. I think by 1975 it became built, and it's in Japan, and it is the world's first international university, and Trump can't stop people from going there. So the Lieutenant Governor, when she handed me the awards, she said that she too drives an electric vehicle, and that she was going to listen to the podcast. She sounded very sincere that she was looking forward to listening to the podcast. So,
well, hello if you're listening.
If we need to get a message to the King, we now have an outlet to do that. Once a week, we could just, pass it along.
Yeah.
We probably should be a bit more respectable now that we have someone serious listening. After hearing about all the other people receiving recognition on Friday and what they do, which is basically hands-on work in the community, it's very different than what we do, Brian. We operate in isolation.
Yeah.
Even more than most podcasts because we're recorded from remote locations. We're not in the same room together, although it feels like we are.
Yeah.
These people are out there doing things. And God, I was humbled. It was really mind-blowing for me as a podcaster. I mean, podcasters are not good people. They're just people. Everybody has a podcast. We've been working hard for 5 years and we've built an audience, and I hope we've educated people. We'll hear from people later on in the show that says we are, but to be included among them, it was a changing moment for me. I feel part of that community now, and I give greater weight to the work we do, and I think the work that I do, I think it's going to inspire me to work even harder and take things seriously, and hopefully that will continue. We'll have more about that throughout the show, but that's my thoughts. And you were out of town. You were at the lake enjoying a nice weekend, or was it nice?
Well, I mean, smoky, which you're going to talk about in a second here, but yeah, we couldn't see the other side of the lake. It was so smoky, but yeah, I know we're going to talk more about the smoke, but I just want to give my shout out to Glenn Wright for nominating us. Thank you so much, Glenn. And of course, to Roger Petrie, who is the head of this organization and an old friend of both of ours and a person who does tons of this kind of work in sustainable development. So hats off to Roger.
Yeah, you can watch the whole Clean Energy Show section, a few minutes long, on our Patreon page. It's there for everybody. You don't have to sign up. However, I don't know how much I've seen Roger since I was a teenager. You know, I remember him being part of my friend's circle. And then he went off to Cambridge as a Rhodes Scholar, and I was going to the University of Regina, the local university film program. Two very different things, although he quit almost instantly. Two very good programs, he said.
Yeah.
But I didn't think I would cross paths with him again. He was going to be a respectable person, and I was going to be a fellow with a fine arts degree in my local city. But here we are. He's back here teaching in our city. He's got a doctorate and a distinguished person, and always a very, very kind person. So I enjoy seeing him. He's just such a kind presence. Always has been.
Yeah, and that's so great that the two of you could meet up here like some 40 years later. That's amazing.
It is amazing.
All right, so we were talking about fast fashion a few weeks ago on the show, a topic we delve into occasionally because, as we know, there's a pretty large carbon footprint to the clothing industry, and it's one of those things that's getting worse instead of better because people's habits in terms of fashion have really changed in the last couple of decades, and they've changed towards fast fashion, more disposable kind of clothing. And as we reported a couple of weeks ago, this ends up getting donated to charity shops, and there's just so much the charity shops can't take them. And of course, a lot of the clothing is made out of polyester, which basically doesn't decompose. It's going to be in our landfill for perhaps thousands of years. So this story from Bloomberg, a report card on fast fashion. This is a group called Stand.Earth. We are starting to see more of a division in the fashion sector, they said. We have this smaller group of companies actually putting money and staff into making this kind of change happen in terms of more sustainability. But the majority of fashion companies still aren't taking enough action in this. So H&M is one of the big companies in the world and a brand that people will probably know.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually surprised to find them coming out on top.
Yeah. So H&M, it's a Swedish company, and they sort of became big over here in North America maybe 20, 25 years ago. And I assume they're big all over the world now. And I remember kind of when they came out, like it was sort of a hip thing when H&M first sort of arrived here because it was a new and different thing. Like we didn't really have a label for fast fashion then, but here was the store selling inexpensive clothing that was fashionable. And, you know, I remember it being kind of a hip and cool thing when it first came to Canada. But of course, if you want to maintain being a hip and cool thing, you have to start listening to people and you have to start taking these kinds of concerns about sustainability seriously. So there's basically three of the biggest. They ranked something like 40 companies worldwide, this organization Stand.Earth. But the kind of the top three are H&M, which got a B+, which is not bad. So H&M is taking actually quite a few steps to eventually get to net zero. Inditex is the next one. That's also known as Zara. They got a C, and there's another company called Shine that got an F. So those are the three biggest ones. And yeah, I was surprised to see that H&M was kind of making so much progress. But, it's a long way to go. So it says here H&M was one of only 3 brands reviewed by Stand.Earth that met rigorous United Nations criteria for net zero target integrity. It was one of 6 that provided financing to suppliers to transition to clean energy, either directly or in the form of a bank loan, according to the report. The company reported spending about $179 million last year on decarbonization measures. So they have apparently some kind of a plan to get to net zero. And according to this report, it is perhaps a realistic goal. But, as a whole, of course, fashion really has a long, long way to go for, they could address all these concerns.
So I see they give scores on commitments and transparency, renewable energy transition, advocacy, which H&M got an A on, and an A+ on commitments and transparency, which is good because sometimes you need to be transparent about your supply chains and everything else. Materials and circularity and clean shipping. So, yeah, that's something to think about. I don't know. I think younger generations actually are holding their brands, the things that they go to on a regular basis to account now. They're writing letters and using social media to, I guess, shame some of the bigger corporations that they use into doing better.
Yeah, and I'm always conscious of what materials my clothing is made of. I tend to go for 100% cotton, which is all organic and should degrade and decompose. I'm not sure if the younger generation is there yet, if they have an awareness about those kinds of plasticized fabrics or not. Of course, younger people have less money to spend, so it can be harder when you're on a tight budget in terms of clothing. But there seems to be generally more awareness overall that, we got to stop putting all this polyester into our landfills.
I should not be using polyester because I live next to a series of fossil fuel pipelines.
Yeah.
And if they go up, I want something that's less flammable. But also, I'm a big guy and I do overheat. So I use blends of polyester sometimes and, spandex and things to keep cool in athletic shirts and things like that. Not proud of it, but here, by the way, it's allergy season. So I may have a 20 sneeze allergy fit sometime in the next 4 weeks or every week. We'll see. Just so you know.
Yeah.
Okay, the RCE Awards. I wanted to recognize some of the other people that sort of struck me. I had a conversation before the awards ceremony. I'm not a very social person, Brian, but I had a nice talk with Andrew Johnson, who's the president of an organization called One School, One Farm. Now, what they do, according to his slides, was build healthy relationships between urban and rural people and between humanity and nature. It connects urban schools, so schools in a city like ours, with a farm that is within about an hour. He says it has to be within about an hour. So they find a farmer, or the farmer is frequently coming to them, and the goal is for healthier people through healthier land. This goal is reached through planning and planting diverse habitats that support pollinators. They sequester carbon and prevent erosion and maintain the water cycle. And I thought his journey to get there was actually quite interesting. He has an English degree, which is usually means you're unemployed. It's around these days. But he ended up as an arborist for the city of Saskatoon in the Urban Forestry Department. That's a city 2.5 hours north of us. That is like 300,000 people or so. He got involved with a One School, One Farm after his son learned about climate change in 5th grade and came to be, like many youths, anxious about climate change. So he was very concerned. And he wanted to show his son that there are little things you can do. You're not helpless. There are things you can do. So he joined this program to show his son. And I was very touched by that. And I know my kids are climate anxious, and they became so at a certain point when they learned about it in school. And then in the case of my oldest son, he's now 21, but when he was in late elementary school, he was researching climate, and he became very knowledgeable about things that I had no idea about. He started to understand currents, ocean currents, and what happens when they stop or get affected by climate, what the models say is going to happen. So he became anxious, and I think at some point he may have kind of given up on the whole thing. stopped worrying about it and just was resigned to it, which is kind of just this cloud over his life, which I feel bad about for not only for my kids, but the generation that they are in and future generations as well. And it makes me so angry when politicians ignore such things, especially around here. There's so many positive things going on to address climate change that get overlooked, and largely because they're happening outside our province, which is not doing much, and not, a lot of the rural people, the rural governments that represent the rural people say that climate change basically doesn't exist. Nothing's different than it ever was before, which is absolutely sticking your head in the sand after this past weekend. Here's a short clip from one school, one farm. This is his presentation at the awards event, just a little clip.
Starting with 2 pilot projects in 2020, we've grown to 22 partnerships across Saskatchewan. One of the biggest takeaways from our work is that although we're probably best classified as an environmental action and education organization, some of the biggest benefits are in community building and mental health.
All right, so he was there and gave a great presentation early on in the day. There was also a breastfeeding advocacy group called the Breastfeeding Advocacy Hub. They were honored with a special award, noting that breastfeeding is the most sustainable way to feed a baby. And I hadn't thought of that before. I don't think it's ever come up on our show before in 5 years.
Yeah.
And there's sort of declining rates in our province of breastfeeding, which is too bad because it makes your kids healthier and smarter. And there's all kinds of health benefits to breastfeeding a baby and doing it longer and not just a shorter period of time. So they had lots of information on that. They were also a winner of one of the 5 special awards that were given out. And that's something I hadn't thought about before. By the way, I think we breastfed our kids too long because they're too smart. I would wish they were less intimidating to me and less humiliated me less often.
Yeah, you want to take the edge off something.
You want to make them around the same level, but not too smart. Jason Cook-Studer from the Ronge Indian Band, they are up north in our province, kind of central if you look at it on a map, but it's considered north. And they're burning. They're evacuated right now.
Yeah.
And it's a place that most Saskatchewanians that go to at some point in their lives because the highway goes there and you can, that's what's mostly their northern tip. We had friends, one of them passed away recently, who had a cabin nearby on an island on Namibian Lake. And there was 5 cabins there. And one was this eccentric German guy who gave them trouble all the time. But they also relied on each other because they're on this tiny island. And if the boats aren't going or if they want to know when the ice is broken, well, they're under evacuation too. I don't know how far they are away from shore. I can't remember exactly. It's got a beautiful name. It's called Sunset Island. But if the embers, they can travel up to a mile or so, sometimes 2 miles in certain conditions and fire weather. So hopefully they're safe. But they sold their cabin recently anyway. I think they are in the process of selling it. So hopefully that's taken care of. So Jason's organization is Pithas Wiskotu Community Energy. And I told him, I said, what you do here fits right into our show. We're going to cover it.
Yeah.
Because it's just the type of thing that we talk about on our show. Jason is a former electrician, a former power utility linesman, and he decided one day that, going up on the power poles in the wintertime wasn't for him. So he got into other things. And he became a solar technician as well as other things. He does solar installs on traplines. He teaches solar and is now making microgrids and district heating using wood that would otherwise be burned in a pile by the forestry industry. When the forestry industry comes in and takes the wood, there's a whole big giant pile left behind, and then they burn it. And he thought, well, we could use that for something. Why just burn it? And here's an edited portion of his presentation at the awards event.
Hi, I'm Jason Cook-Studer from the Ronge Indian Band. Our department is called Pithas Wiskotu, and that's how we say electricity in Cree. There is no actual word for electricity, and so it's a combination of 2 words. So Pithas means bird, and Iskotu means fire. So we talked about Dogamal Pithas, the firebird, the thunderbird, and a mythological creature that flies around and creates the winds and brings electricity and lightning to the ground and starts forest fires. We work on energy projects. We really start with engaging with elders in the community and youth in the schools and leadership and finding what some of the problems are that we can then address them with energy solutions. I'm also a solar technician, and I host information sessions, workshops, teaching trappers of the N8 and N9 Trappers Associations how to install some of these panels themselves. So some of the trappers then go out and they build their own, 2 kilowatt system. And then they're noticing now they don't have to bring gas out and they don't have to run their generator. Their trapline is much quieter. And so that's just one of the benefits. But that's really not my job. That's just something I do on the side. My main job is the manager, balancing all these different projects. So we got some projects related to biomass in Hall Lake. We're studying the rivers along Grandmother's Bay, Stanley Mission, Zucker River. We're looking at solar projects. We got 6 solar displays ready to go up. I guess the big problem is we're reliant on propane and electricity that's transmitted such a far distance. And the power line is not very reliable at times, especially right now. The risk of forest fire will take out that line for over a week, and then our communities will be out power. In the winter, the snowstorms can also take out the power line, and then we're without power for sometimes 3 or 4 days. And in the winter, it's worse because our elders and our youth are freezing. And so we're trying to build some resilience. We're trying to build some sustainable solutions to lower our footprint related to propane and whatnot. So we've renovated over 350 homes, and we got funding to do another 150 this year. We're looking at solar, battery microgrids, a biomass district heating project. So in Hall Lake, there's a lot of forestry, like I mentioned, and a lot of that wood is being hauled off to a sawmill. But there is lots of trees that are not going to the sawmill. They're not making its way there. And community members are concerned because every spring, those piles of wood, they're called burn piles because someone comes in and they burn them. And so there's 10 piles, bigger than this room, and they're just going up in smoke. And the community is concerned, like, how come there's a policy where we've removed wood stoves from our homes, we're reliant on propane, and we're just burning this wood in the field? And so there's these gaps in understanding why that is the way it is. And community, they're coming to our department with these concerns. And so that's where we get this project where we could wood chip those burn piles and burn them in a community fireplace that can be districtly, we can pump the heat around to the other community buildings, lowering our reliance on the propane in the winter.
That's a fascinating. We'd be covering that regardless, wouldn't we? Because that's something we talk about, and it's a very innovative way to use that waste wood.
Yeah, we've often talked about northern communities, which often rely on diesel generators, and it's just, it's terrible, it's noisy, it's smelly, it's polluting, and all that diesel needs to be shipped in, which is often, a nightmare in and of itself. So, having sustainable microgrids, it makes total sense. And, you end up maybe not having to rely on the grid power lines, which often go down in northern communities. Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. I did visit Ronge once. This is sort of the farthest north that a lot of us from around here go, and it is pretty isolated. I think most people would be surprised at how isolated it is at a place like that, but it's the most sort of easily accessible northern community to us, and it's absolutely beautiful up there.
Oh, yes, and I imagine the mosquitoes are doing some good work up there as well. Now, when he says this is as big as this room, this is a brand new renovated auditorium we were in. Think of it about the size of a gymnasium, except it had theater seating. My partner was warning me because she went to Luther College when she was a student there. She said, those seats are terrible, and they have these little wooden things that go over, and you're not going to be comfortable, and your back is out. And they just renovated it, and it's just state-of-the-art, beautiful, fantastic, great visual and audio, and great seats. So yeah, it's a very nice little auditorium they have there. But it is hard to imagine a woodpile that big because it is a big auditorium.
Yeah. And
by the way, I had an active bladder because I have pills I'm taking, new pills, and I saw this back door. So you climb up to the top of the chairs, and there's a door back there that was propped open. So I went out thinking that I could, that's the next floor up, and I'll just go and find the closest bathroom. Well, there wasn't the next floor up. It was a fire escape, and there was other doors that would not open. So I found myself at the loading dock where somebody was smoking. And then I went out onto the grass and all around the building, found a bathroom, and came back upstairs. It was a long process. A mistake by James. But anyway, Yeah, I love that idea, and we're going to hear more in the show from Jason in a little bit, and I'm going to explain what a trapline is for those of you who don't know. Now it's time for the mailbag.
All right, we have a letter here from Stephen. Just wanted to say I love your show. Listen to it often on my way to and from work, and honestly, it inspires me to keep going on my clean energy journey. You guys have been in my ear through my energy audit, window upgrades, exterior insulation project, photovoltaic system install, and our 2 EV purchases. Even now, as I muddle through trying to get a heat pump, I'm being held back by a province that doesn't seem to understand the technology. 4 companies in, and not a single one will do anything but a dual fuel system. Sigh. But just know that there are those of us in Alberta that listen to your show and are keeping up the good fight. Keep it up. That is Stephen in Alberta, Canada. And James, I always get a little bit nervous when you start insulting people in various jurisdictions, and with a broad stroke of a pen, you dismiss the entire province of Alberta. But obviously, there are people there that believe in sustainability. It's just one of those things where, every state, every province has people on both sides of an issue. It's just unfortunately in places like Alberta or Saskatchewan where we live, there's just a few too many that can sway the political fortunes in, unfortunately, the wrong direction.
Yeah, and there's no province I go after harder than our own.
Yeah.
Because I'm so frustrated with, our province is on fire right now, and the premier came out and said, no, we want to export as much oil as possible because it's cleaner, and it's not. I'll talk about that in the lightning round, which is coming up later. And I see that Stephen has looks like a Chevy Bolt, maybe the first generation of Bolt, as well. Is that a Model S there in his driveway?
Model 3.
That's a Model 3? Okay. And then some solar panels on the roof as well in Alberta. We've had other people from Alberta write in, so it's not terribly new. And, Saskatchewan is more willing to join the United States slightly than Alberta, and more conservative and more, I don't know. Well, everybody moves away, most people like us would move away by now. And it was really nice to see all these people, at that conference or at that event. Yeah. And that was rejuvenating, too, to realize there was like-minded people around.
Yeah, a nice reminder that there are like-minded people. But yeah, it's just, and I don't think the imbalance is all that great, but it's not enough of an imbalance in our favor to pretty much ever win an election ever again.
And it's like in the United States, it's a rural-urban split quite often. It's very heavily involved in the rural areas. Yeah, the Regina superchargers where we live, the Tesla superchargers, somebody put glue on them, on the connectors.
Interesting.
A couple of them are still working if you are in Saskatchewan and wanting to charge your Tesla here. So those are the chargers that you would use for most people on a road trip, or if you live in an apartment, you might go there once a week or something like that to charge. And by the way, I can't believe, the other day we were driving the Bolt, which hasn't been plugged in forever. And I kept thinking, is it broken? Like the mileage, I didn't take careful note of it, but it seemed like it wasn't going down.
Yeah.
And I was hoping that it was going to go down so that it would show me that it was working. But it's incredible the city warm weather mileage you get in an electric car.
Yeah.
Because you're stopping and starting and you're regenerating the electricity from your braking. And it's just night and day from winter. Like, it's really crazy.
Yeah. No, and it's quite a shock to us who are plugging in our cars all winter long, freezing cold temperatures that we talk about all the time. But then in the summer, it's like, yeah, you don't need to plug in your car for days, even if you're driving a lot.
Crazy. It just does not use any electricity at all, it seems like. And of course, they're getting better batteries. We'll see when they come to consumers, but there are better batteries in China that work down to -40 with only losing, a small percentage, like 10% of their capacity, as opposed to like a lot more where we live. Weldon Penner on our Patreon page also dropped us a note. He says, I like how the sun on the Clean Energy Show logo looks when it's spinning like a buzzsaw at the end of your videos. It reminds me of how you guys like to rip through all the BS to get to what's important. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Weldon. And Derek on our Patreon page saw that we had received some recognition. It says, congratulations, well-deserved and overdue. Timo also wrote in. He said, awesome news. You deserve it. Thank you all for writing us. We love to hear from our listeners. Contact us by email, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, or drop us a note in the comments on our Patreon page. And you can also leave us a voicemail online at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow.
All right, from Bloomberg, Swiss glacier collapse predicted and save lives. I'm just going to start that
Okay.
again.
That's too bad, because I had one line in my high school play ever, and it was, was it The Devil and Daniel Webster? And I was a jury member, and I said, the sea and the swift whaling ships. And I got it right, but in dress rehearsal, I blew it, and everyone was on the floor laughing because I had one line, and I couldn't get through it, and I was taunted for years for that.
All right, well, then I guess we have to leave that part in, but I will say it again. From Bloomberg, Swiss glacier collapse was predicted and saved a bunch of lives.
Yeah,
so
I was wondering about that, because the glacier was in the news. It took out the whole town, and somehow, was it one person who died?
Yeah, there's still one person missing. But
how did they know?
Well, they have all these sensors in place, and they do have various programs, and they use drones to fly around. And the bad news is that not every country and every glacier is being monitored in this way. But they did an amazing job of predicting this. They evacuated the town of Blotten days before the Birch Glacier collapsed, but the resources that allowed them to do that are not available to most countries. The collapse of the Birch Glacier in the Swiss Alps was an expected disaster. Authorities and scientists had been monitoring the area closely, and when the first signs of instability started to appear, over a week before the event, they evacuated the town, and this is a town sitting below the glacier. The landslide obliterated 90% of the village, and there is still one person missing, according to Swiss authorities. So apparently billions of people globally live downstream from glaciers, and at least 15 million are directly exposed to floods from glacial lakes. According to a 2023 research paper, glaciers have melted at the fastest pace on record this decade, leading to an increase of lakes that can burst at any time, unleashing hundreds of tons of rocks and ice, together with landslides and floods that destroy everything. So, obviously we talk about glaciers melting. This is a reality that's happening. But, I would just tend to think of this mostly as a slow drip. But of course, these glaciers have been there for so long. They are in many ways very structural, and they're embedded in the mountains, and they're embedded with rocks and mud and, occasionally bodies of water. So it's really can be kind of like an explosion, basically. It isn't just always a slow melt. And that's what happened in Switzerland. But, amazing job at predicting this. So it's very much a good news, bad news kind of story. The bad news is glaciers can explode. The good news is it is possible with enough monitoring to perhaps predict it most of the time.
Brian, I just wanted to move on now, because I've got a message from TikTok that I put out a feeler the other day when we got a letter from Alberta.
Yeah.
I remembered that we had another person, a young person who was a teenager, who said that we were inspiring because in their small town, everyone was against solar and things like that. And then they went off to engineering school at the University of Saskatchewan in the city of Saskatoon that we mentioned earlier. And that's also where my son went, although he's in BC now on internship. So I said, hi there. We're talking about Alberta this week, and I just wondered how the U of S went for you, because they weren't sure how it was going to go. And this person was called Thousand Sunny, is their TikTok handle. And they wrote back and they said, I survived, just happy to be home because it's never-ending pile of work. I imagine it is. And Saskatoon is too cold for being an Albertan. Walking to class at -40 for months wore down on me. Well, it wasn't -40 for months, but I know it was cold, and that took a long time. And they said, I appreciate the check-in and pray you stay in good health to finish the show in 2030. So they're aware of our 2030 agenda to keep going.
Yeah. That's kind of our deadline.
But we're not going to stop, because AI will replace us and be a better version of us.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, Brian, I want to talk about after the awards program now, where I told you I went to the bathroom, so I was outside and it was fine, but I had no connection to the outdoors because we had lunch, we had coffee inside, but we decided to take the group photo outside after the Clean Energy Show received its prestigious award. And then it hit me. It was the worst air I've ever breathed. And I don't know. the timing of it was quite interesting for that to happen after a sustainability event like that.
Yeah.
And then you walk outside with everyone, and it was absolutely terrible. You weren't in town, but there was a cold front that sort of bunched up the air. And I have a picture on our Patreon page of, by the way, I got 2 parking tickets, but I fought them because I wrote my number down wrong on the app, my plate number, and they accepted it. I did some screen captures, and yeah, they got back to me. So that's very nice, because parking tickets are a lot more expensive than they were in my day. And I got in trouble in my day. They were $5 and I couldn't even pay that. And I had to go to court, and it was unpleasant because I never had a parking pass. That air was brown, and it was hard to breathe, and it was nothing like. And I've breathed bad air from forest fires before. I've breathed the Toronto smog in the late 90s when it was still pretty bad on times, but this was nothing like that. And my son said, well, why don't you look up the history to see what it was at that time? So I did with the AQI, the air quality index, based on the U.S. standard, and it was 446, which is considered hazardous. And 300 is where the hazardous level starts. So it was hazardous plus 50%, the way I see it. And it was just atrocious. People were worried that they couldn't drive back. The forest fires aren't in our backyard. They're hundreds of kilometers away.
Yeah.
The person who drove down from Prince Albert, he was, that's a long drive. That's a long ways away. And some of them are a bit closer, but they're not that close. They're hundreds of kilometers away. And it was terrible. I know you guys in the States are experiencing it as well, but it's not like we had that day. There was, wind, there was low humidity, there was some heat, there was drought. There's that fire weather from John Valent, who says that 30 degrees Celsius, 30% humidity, and 30-kilometer winds create very bad fire weather conditions. Unlike what we used to have in the previous century, this is very different. So the hazardous category is the highest category. 380 is like breathing 50 cigarettes. Ours was 446. So if we had that all day, you would have to smoke, 60 cigarettes if we had that all day. Fortunately, it didn't stick around all day. My daughter texted me. She said there's haze in the hallway at school. Wow. She couldn't look down the hallway indoors without seeing a smoke haze. That's how bad it was. She thought there was a fire in the woodworking department, or they had, created smoke from working in there. This sort of thing is crazy, and it doesn't happen too often. And it's given me great empathy for people in places like India who have to go months sometimes with air like this. There's a list of big cities that are terrible. Ours was the worst in the world at the time. But, it's just because it gets inside the house, right? It's inside the house as well. So I came home and I closed the windows and, ran my little air purifier to the max. But when the air cleared up, I was so happy because, to breathe clean air, I really appreciate air now. Like, it was just traumatic. My pool was going to open that day finally because it's heated by solar panels. Well, the sun went away. So there was no heat in my pool, and it's not been warm since. Of course, our solar electricity panels on our roof took a huge hit as well. So when it's in that hazardous range, you have to avoid strenuous outdoor activities, keep windows and doors closed, use clean air filters in your home, wear a well-fitting respirator if you must go outdoors. There's a lot of bad things that happen, and it affects not only the unhealthy, Brian, it affects everyone. So some bad air quality can affect, the people who are sick, but when it gets this bad, it affects everyone, and you cannot do strenuous work. And, it's interesting because, people are not allowed to go inside. They almost played a professional football league game that night, but it was delayed by 2 hours because they looked at the smoke forecast. They could see that it was forecast to move out. Luckily, it did. It was still pretty bad, but it wasn't that bad. You could not do anything. Like, the group photo should have been canceled. Like, that's how bad it was. And I made a joke that not everyone is going to survive this group photo because it's just that bad outside. So we need a new system because, in Canada, we have this air quality index between 1 and 10 plus.
Yeah.
And 10 plus is way down here compared to where 446 in the American index is. And you don't know just how bad it is. You think the 10 plus, okay, that's that. But it might be multitude of times worse.
Yeah. It just means the system really goes above 1 to 10. They just don't give you the detail about how far above 10 the system goes. So yeah, absolutely. That needs to be updated.
No, it only lasted a couple of days really bad. But I felt like COVID again because I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't go to my backyard. I felt, that was depressing. It takes a hit on your mental health. And the streets were very empty. My car was a great place to be because it's got air filters in it, right? And you keep those up to date, and it actually does a pretty good job. But this is not the new normal. A lot of people say this is a new normal. This is not the right way to put it because the climate is getting hotter. It's not going to stay like this, and this isn't going to be the new normal. It's going to actually get worse. And rural people around here don't believe in climate change. And I've talked about this before on the show, and because of the refinery that I live about a mile from, I'm thinking of buying an air quality index monitor from IQ Air that would be part of a network, but they're very expensive. They're $429 Canadian. And my friend John said, I'll help you fundraise. So he told me one time that he would help me fundraise. We'll see if he actually does. But maybe I'll do a GoFundMe. If you're interested, drop us a line. I would have it. There are 3 in the city. One is owned by the CTV.
Right.
The affiliate of the private Canadian television network that's here.
So the idea being that if you were able to get one of these, it would be connected to the AQI network, and then it would feed data to that network, which is a website that you can go to.
My specific reason would be for the refinery to alert people of how dangerous the air is by posting data as to how, what it is and comparing it to other things. And not just because we do have the ones for the forest fire, I would be specific to the refinery. So yeah, and that would hopefully educate people because people are very in the dark. The refinery brings money, so we just shut up about it. The politicians shut up and just let them do whatever they want. And I remember a year ago, I was talking about participating in the book that was about the refinery, and there's some good reporting and investigative journalism there, but the refinery can sue your ass off, so you can't say hardly anything about them, and people are very careful. So a total 20 Saskatchewan communities are now considered evacuations, as wildfires continue to wreak havoc across the north. This is a classic climate change, said Colin Larocque, head of soil science and professor at the University of Saskatchewan. He told that to CBC. Larocque said climatology is studied using 30-year timeframes of weather patterns, which weren't that different until recently. Laurie Daniels, professor and researcher at the University of British Columbia's Department of Forest and Conservation Sciences, said the emergency wildfire situation in the province is a result of an emergency global climate situation. The further we are from the equator, we're seeing that those changes are amplified, Daniels said. In northern Canada and the northern parts of provinces and up into the territories, we are experiencing more than 3 times the global average in terms of temperature change. Daniels said climate change is the new reality that we have to face, and it's unclear how long the province will be dealing with these fires. And Jason Cook-Struder, who was on my last segment there, from Ronge, the person from the north doing the microgrids and the district heating with wood piles, he traveled all the way down from Ronge for the event, and he's dealing with some of these fires burning in our province with his traplines. In Saskatchewan, a trapline it's not a line. It's easy to think that if a trapline is a line, it's not a line. It's a large area of land, specific defined area of land where an individual or group has the legal right to trap fur-bearing animals. So he's part of an indigenous community that has certain areas where they are able to trap, and he's trying to protect that. It's essentially managed trapping territory with boundaries determined by ministry-regulated boundaries. Here's a clip of him talking about it.
Dogamalpidisiu, the firebird, the thunderbird, and a mythological creature that flies around and creates the winds and brings electricity and lightning to the ground and starts forest fires. And that's almost what stopped me from coming here yesterday was the fire surrounding Ronge. I was at my trap line and I had my sprinklers going and I'm trying to keep my trap line from burning. So I ran the sprinklers for about 3 hours and then I filled it up with gas before I left, and hopefully it ran for another 3 hours. And so just our little effort that we can do to try and protect what's home. There's a lot of forests going on that are being burnt, and there's no real firefighting being done. The communities are fire smart. and there's firefighters protecting the communities and the homes, but the forest is allowed to just burn. And so that's kind of, it's a good way to rebalance what has been unbalanced. But at the same time, that's where our traditional homes is in the forest. And so it's very important for us to be out there and protecting it.
So he's desperately trying to run sprinklers. He ran them for 3 hours and he knew that he would run out of fuel. And as he came down, and he did the best he could, but he also put his land at risk that he uses. So
yeah, my grandfather, Gents, actually spent a winter on a trapline once in northern Saskatchewan. My grandfather, he was born in 1899, and then sometime like in the 1920s, like the early 1920s, he came to Saskatchewan. My grandparents were homesteaders. You could get kind of free land here. And yeah, one winter in his 20s, there was a person he knew who said, "Hey, do you want to come spend the winter with me on my trapline?" And, you know, my grandfather needed a job or needed some money and said, "Yeah, sure." And but the punchline is, the family story ends with he spent the whole winter on this trapline in, you know, horrible conditions, and came out at the end of the winter with less money than he went in with.
Oh.
Okay, and just to sort of wrap up the smoke talk, I know we've talked about this before in the podcast, but the smoke here from our part of the world, from Western Canada, is once again so bad that they're actually getting a little tinge of it in Europe. So if you're in Europe and there's a tiny bit of smoke in the air, once again, we would like to apologize for that.
I just hope it all goes to Washington, D.C., Brian. Join our Patreon today as a paying member. Get access to our exclusive Patreon episodes. You can now support us for as little as $1 a month on our Patreon page. Some of the perks are ad-free episodes, exclusive access to the Discord server, discounts on our merch, early access to our episodes before the public gets them, behind-the-scenes material with private updates, and thank you credits on our video podcast and shout-outs on our audio podcast, which we'll do today because it is the first podcast episode of the month. And I also want to thank some of our newest members, Doug, David, John without an H, and Nylia, Jamie, and Richard. And we'll talk more about our Patreon members, give them a shout out at the end of the show. Thank you all to support our show. Coming up next is the lightning round.
Hi, I'm Chris Gethard, and I'm very excited to tell you about Beautiful Anonymous, a podcast where I talk to random people on the phone. I tweet out a phone number, thousands of people try to call, we talk to one of them, they stay anonymous, I can't hang up, that's all the rules. I never know what's going to happen. We get serious ones. I've talked with meth dealers on their way to prison. I've talked to people who survived mass shootings. Crazy funny ones. I talked to a guy with a goose laugh, somebody who dresses up as a pirate on the weekends. I never know what's going to happen. It's a great show. Subscribe today, Beautiful Anonymous.
It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
Speaking of particles in the air traveling long distances, Brian, a massive cloud of dust from the Sahara Desert blanketed most of the Caribbean on Monday in the biggest event of its kind this year as it heads towards the United States. The cloud extended some 3,200 kilometers from Jamaica to well past Barbados in the eastern Caribbean, and some 1,200 kilometers from the Turks and Caicos Islands in the northern Caribbean down to Trinidad and Tobago. This plume is expected to hit Florida, Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi later this week and into the weekend, although it is expected to be a little bit more diluted. Vatican City joins Albania, Bhutan, Nepal, Paraguay, Iceland, Ethiopia, and the DRC to become 100% renewable country. Way to go, Vatican City.
Yeah,
Gotta get the Pope
excellent.
on the show. Gotta get the Pope on the show. The EU is within 1% of reaching its 2030 climate goals, the European Union. And it's time for a CS Fast Fact. Producing a barrel of oil in Saskatchewan results in higher emissions compared to Alberta and British Columbia, and the province's emissions intensity has actually been increasing, according to data compiled by Enverus Intelligence Research. And our politicians here are going around and saying, we want to sell oil because if we don't, someone else will, and ours is cleaner. Well, it actually isn't, and it wouldn't be okay if it was, because oil in itself is not clean. It is a filthy, disgusting thing that is causing our planet to burn. We have to get off it. If If you listen to the show, you know there are ways to get off of it. Woman sues oil companies for causing her mother's death. On the day her mother died, the Pacific Northwest was experiencing a heat dome, a blast of hot air that lay over the region like a pall. On that day, the temperature in Seattle reached 108 Fahrenheit, the highest ever recorded for the city. An attribution study released shortly after the event by a team of climate scientists claimed the 2021 heat dome would have been virtually impossible, so she is suing. BYD is committed to deploying 15,000 megawatt chargers across China. What's a megawatt charger? That is 1,000 kilowatts.
Yeah.
Typically around here, maybe 250, 350 at most. They have new cars that can take that, and there's lots of chargers in China, but the BYD, the largest automaker in China, only makes electric and plug-in hybrid cars. 15,000 is a lot. Even for China, that is a lot of chargers that they are committing because those cars are barely on the road. China is installing a record of 105 gigawatts of solar between January and April of this year. That's 8 times what thermal capacity has been installed. This is an update to info we shared last week. China CATL will reward suppliers who cut emissions as it aims for zero carbon supply chain. So that's good. The world's largest battery maker is rewarding suppliers who cut emissions. So they're trying to get their supply chain emissions down. Search for Solar launches sale of secondhand solar modules. It is a solar panel trading platform based in the Netherlands. It is urging developers, installers, and governments to reuse Second Life modules. Sometimes when they replace solar farms, the modules are still good. They can test them and say there's still like 70% life in this or something like that. Kind of like an EV battery.
I'm not going to do it anytime soon, but it would be amazing to get more energy efficient panels on my roof. I really don't have any more roof space for more solar panels, but what I could do is upgrade to better, newer ones, but then obviously be great to have something to do with the old ones.
Yeah, they have huge warehouses with these. And we talked about before that Africa and other emerging regions of the world can take these panels and change lives. There was a story on CBC News this week about India, people who are generally quite poor who harvest salt there. A lot of the salt, table salt, comes from India. They need water pumped up, and they were using diesel generators and gas generators and choking on it, and they had to pay lots of money for it. They got funding from the government to pay for most of some solar panels to do the same job. Their income doubled. Their lifestyle doubled. They now they couldn't afford a bicycle before. Now they can afford a motorbike and other things, and they have a second home in the city because 8 months a year they do this, and then 4 months they're back in the city, and their life has changed because of solar, because solar is cheap and easy to do, and because the government helped them get it set up. The U.S. solar and wind has generated 50.5% of U.S. utility supplied electricity in March, 50.8% in April. That's just solar and wind.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. And finally this week, a digital open table style reservation system. You know what open table is? Have you ever used that or heard of it?
Yeah, I use it sometimes to book a meal at a restaurant.
Even I did once, and I don't eat out at a nice restaurant. That's sort of an app system that helped Los Angeles shipping ports reduce vessel congestion and pollution. This is a low-tech solution that cut shipping emissions by up to 24%, and shipping emissions are bad because they burn the waste fuel that no one else wants, and it usually stinks and is horrible and black and terrible. A queuing system implemented at the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach has reduced estimated carbon dioxide emissions by up to 24% per voyage between East Asia and Southern California. The system, which reserves a place in line for arriving vessels, allows captains to slow down without fear of losing their spot. So if they know that they're going to be sitting around, they don't have to worry. They can just take it slower and reduce their fuel consumption and emissions. The queuing system is a low-tech and relatively inexpensive, costing only $300,000 annually to operate. It has the potential to be replicated on other ports around the world to reduce emissions in the shipping industry, which is really cool. Somebody came up with a very simple idea, applied it to ships of all things, and making a huge impact just from that.
That's amazing. And you would think that some type of system would have existed already for that, but obviously they had something antiquated, which could be updated with technology. So Fantastic. I love ending the show on some great news like that. Please contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. We are on social media as Clean Energy Pod. You can visit our Patreon, patreon.com/cleanenergypod. And we have a merch store that's listed in the show notes. And please, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe or follow button so you can get a new episode every week.
Thank you to our Patreon supporters who get the occasional shout-outs on the show. Clean Club Executive, they give the most to Green Bastard, Brent Routley, Clean Club Plus, that's the medium one, Bob Armstrong, John Hayes, and Wes S., and Clean Club, Andy Fessler, John Engen, Sean Ennis, Sean Hines, Timo Kellenberger, Peter O'Donnell, Wellen Penner, Roshan Gervais, and Richard W., as well as to all the people in our supporter level program. We really appreciate you supporting us, and now you can do it for as little as $1 a month. We'll see you again in 7 days. Thank you for listening.
See you next week.